Kant was born in Königsberg, and in Königsberg he died. He lived in Königsberg all his life. 60 miles was his furthest ride. So while some can claim that their wisdom came from travelling far and wide, Kant can't. But since philosophy's European civil war began between the Brits, Locke, Berkeley, Hume, and Descartes' continental clan with Spinoza and Leibniz, empiricists v rationalists, can he claim to be the man with the genius and the insight and the long attention span to merge two rival schools of thought into one coherent plan? Yes, indeed, Kant can. Unsurprisingly for a man who stayed in the one location, Königsberg University is where he gained his education, and later as a lecturer there it seemed he'd found his vocation. Slightly built, barely 5 foot tall, what grew was his reputation, as his packed-out performances went thrillingly off-piste. Whatever the topic was meant to be, it became a movable feast, with a wide range of references, witty and smart. Professor Kant's one-man shows were a class apart. And as well as his talks, he was famed for his walks. At the same time, each day, on the dot, he would start. At 8 in the morning, or 5 after tea, bad weather could never deny him. As he passed on his way the same route every day, the locals would set their clocks by him. In fact, because philosophers are easy types to mock, his walking's regularity and stunning punctuality earned Immanuel Kant a nickname, the Königsberg Clock. One more thing about his walks, Kant earnestly believed the benefits of exercise all hinged on how he breathed. You could call it overthinking, but that is why he chose to keep his mouth tight shut and breathe only through his nose. The Königsberg Clock, a man of strict routine, the most iron-willed writer on free will there's ever been. Kant was in his 40s and life was pretty good. Now a published academic, well-liked in his neighbourhood, so no one would suggest that Kant was in a rut, walking philosophically with his mouth tight shut, but Kant's career only started to bloom when the steady tick-tock of the Königsberg Clock was shocked into action by David Hume. Prior to Hume, Kant had assumed philosophy the finest vocation, but the more Kant read of what Hume said, the deeper his consternation. "Hume woke me from my dogmatic slumber" is a popular Kant quotation. A new age of science was gripping the world, rewriting the story of man. Kant himself had come up with a theory of how the world really began, and while all religion was thrown into question by Newton's experimentations, God less the creator, more a spectator, there were other implications. Almighty God was not the only one seen to be losing his power, as Hume set his sights on philosophers, perched in their ivory tower. According to Hume, philosophy was nearing a state of paralysis, as knowledge just comes from two sources, experience and rational analysis. We can answer empirical questions now through science or observation, and self-contained questions of logic or maths through straightforward calculation. So, if the type of question you ask is neither one of those, the answer to it has to be, sorry, no one knows. All other kinds of thinking are, for Hume, no more than a pose. Show him a book on metaphysics, and onto the bonfire it goes. With two types of question worth asking, just two prongs on the end of Hume's fork, why should we care for the empty hot air produced when philosophers talk? And that's how David Hume put Kant's nose out of joint, by saying of philosophy, what exactly is the point? Something for Kant to think about when out on his next walk. A very sharp prod up the backside from the twin spikes on Hume's fork. Was this the end for philosophy? No. Kant brought it back from the brink, with a scientific kind of approach to the mind, a rethink about how we think. Step by step, the Königsberg Clock constructed a new system, as he walked round the block. Step by step, Kant redefined the way we understand the mechanics of the mind. If you want to read the Critique of Pure Reason, it probably helps if you've got some degrees in philosophy, logic, mathematics and physics before taking Kant off the shelf. Though one of the classics, it's had many critics, densely written, not inviting, hard to follow, needs rewriting, and that's all from the author himself. But, step by step, Kant dealt a fatal blow to the zeitgeist's overconfidence in all we think we know. In expanding human knowledge, it was fashionable to believe that now there was no limit to what science could achieve. All the world is out there for humans to explore. If we simply keep on looking, we'll keep finding more and more, until one joyful day we'll say, "That's it, we know the lot." But Kant made clear this hubristic idea showed big thinkers had lost the plot. If you think the whole world is your oyster, Kant has a humbler proposal. The extent of our knowledge is hugely reduced by the tools at our disposal. We know this world through our senses, through our bodies and our brains. Is this meagre equipment truly enough to know all that the world contains? What kind of things are we missing? What signals can't we receive? How can we fathom the unknown unknowns? What dimensions can we not perceive? The answer, says Kant, is we cannot know. Such questions will only frustrate us. Our every experience is limited by our limited apparatus. This universe of phenomena is the one of which we're aware, but there's also what Kant called noumena, all the things that we don't know are there. A phenomenon hits our senses, which we turn into information. A noumenon is a mystery, beyond all imagination, imperceivable to the senses, inconceivable to the mind, existing on a level out of bounds to humankind. We'll never know what we're missing. It's an unbridgeable divide. This phenomenal world is within our reach, the noumenal forever outside. Know your limits, in short, was Kant's chastening thought. It's something we humans can't change. Our ambitions may be high, but however hard we try, we'll never know a thing about the things beyond our range. Step by step, Kant wasn't finished yet with his re-examination of the human mindset. When we look at the tools in our toolbox, no experience is direct. Our minds still have to process the perceptions we collect. It's not enough for our eyes to be hit by passing rays of light. Every flash must be refashioned to become what we call sight. Kaleidoscopes of colours, cacophonies of sound, smells and tastes and touches flying in from all around, we'd be impotent receivers of a flood of information, blinded, bedazzled, utterly frazzled, lost in a blizzard of wild stimulation if we had no internal means of organisation. We need some mental interface to make sense of all this sensation. And for Kant, the mind's equipped since birth to put these things in place, bringing order to chaos through time and space. An awareness of time, the scaffolding of space. Born with these two in our toolbox, the entire human race possesses the ability, sense plus sensibility, to create perceptions of the world beyond the capability of a passive database. Kant also now could question David Hume's suggestion that causality had no grounds to exist. If we follow Kant's script, that our minds come pre-equipped with time and space, why not add cause to that list? Impressions from somewhere outside us, fed into, then shaped by the mind. Empiricism and rationalism now in one process combined, in a synthesis of philosophies with a scientific coherence, which Kant called Transcendental Idealism, how we construct appearance. Transcendental idealism is a typically literal phrase for the scientific process that Kant's critique portrays. Idealism being how we form the ideas which give us our sense of reality. Transcendental, purely mental, those frameworks like time, space, causality. Kant's mind-bending views on the tools that we use to perceive the world that we live in threw off some old chains, but the question remains, how true is the picture we're given? Even though we strongly feel each perception is real, as Kant has shown, it's a process sensation, which we cannot compare to what's truly out there. At best, it's a representation. When we experience reality, in reality what we experience is a human interpretation, not reality, just its appearance. We have to accept there is no way of knowing exactly what a thing is when it gets our senses going. The representation is all we can know. The thing in itself? No, never, no. The thing in itself is a noumenon. The thing in itself is a mystery. Das Ding an sich in Kant's German, a key phrase in philosophy's history. Everything is a thing in itself, with a nature we can't truly know. The human mind may be finely designed, but there's only so far it can go. Just in the way that Copernicus turned the world upside down by showing it wasn't the Earth but the Sun that the planets revolve around, Kant felt he'd made a breakthrough in thought of a similar radical kind by shifting the centre of structured reality from outside to inside the mind, which is why he called his contribution a Copernican Revolution. Step by step, the Königsberg Clock gave another argument a cataclysmic prod concerning the existence of the problem known as God. Conclusive proof that God exists, that religious hot potato, has undergone so many forms since the age of Plato. Cosmological, ontological, teleological, quests for a logical argument to end all arguments and banish every doubt had rumbled on for centuries until Kant pointed out, God is a noumenon. And noumena can't be known. They're beyond our range of awareness, as the critique of pure reason has shown. And therefore, in accordance with the Kantian paradigm, to seek conclusive proof of God is an utter waste of time. God can never be proved or disproved, so once and for all should be gently removed from rational conversation. The atheist and the Pope in Rome can argue till the cows come home, but regarding God's status, Kant has now shown it's a no-win situation. I deny knowledge to make room for faith, was Kant's elegant declaration. A believer himself, Kant did not say God was dead, but he knocked philosophy's search for proof firmly on the head. Free will, like God, was a potent force the scientific era was making seem more vulnerable as enlightenment drew nearer. If the physical world is purely mechanical, following Newton's laws, could it be that we, as physical beings, are likewise subject to cause and effect? In short, do we still possess free will, or just helplessly interconnect? All locked in mindless chorus, our paths decided for us. If every move is determined by the move that moved before, why should we be excluded from this universal law? Free will versus determinism. For free will, was this terminal? Kant said no. I'm determined to show free will does exist, but it's noumenal. Of course, if free will is a noumenon, there's no way to prove it exists. Kant simply appealed to what we all feel and how strongly that feeling persists. We have concepts within us of good, right and wrong. That much is empirically true. And given a choice, we feel we can choose what we ought to or ought not to do. But if you're a strict determinist and some hooligan causes you pain, the fact you deny they possess free will means you logically cannot complain, and while waiting for your ambulance should say in a kindly voice, "Don't blame my attacker, they simply had no choice." Those words would make some sense if your attacker were a tiger, as a tiger's not a rational creature, and yet the way we all react if by humans we're attacked shows in moral choices reason is a feature. But even if, as Kant maintains, we have free will and use our brains, we may disagree over what would be the fairest course of action. So Kant tried to find an objective test to help us work out which decision is best and resolve any moral dilemma to everyone's satisfaction. His dream was a Newton-like law, with a Newton-like universality, one law on which we all could rely in every eventuality. And as science is based on reason, so reason should uphold morality. It's an absolute code of conduct and is partly why Kant's name continues to reside in philosophy's Hall of Fame, a self-help guide on how best to live, the Categorical Imperative. In tricky situations, when decisions must be made, Kant attempts to offer a straightforward, rational aid. You know you have free will, you're not an animal on all fours, and morality's not about personal gain or settling old scores. You have a mind, so take your time, no need to clutch at straws, just follow this key principle, summed up in a single clause. Each of your own actions should fit in with those maxims, which you'd also wish to see as universal laws. An inner voice of reason, one clear proposition, an unconditional pointer towards the right decision. Kant's more personal guidance for deciding the right thing to do was, imagine how you'd feel if it was done to you. Treat fellow humans as ends in themselves, not means to your own ends. Recognise and respect their humanity, whether they're strangers or friends. Be good and love thy neighbour may not sound terribly new to followers of religions which hold a similar view, but that would underestimate what Kant was trying to do. He believed humanity's future was more likely to be harmonious if we can make morality scientific, not simply sanctimonious. Absolute laws can be tricky terrain and, as Kant found, hard to sustain. Never tell a lie was another rule he stated, but open your door to a murderer and things get complicated. When they ask whether their intended victim is inside, Kant says if they are, you must not be dishonest. It would be quite wrong if you lied. This is where Kant's moral compass seems to come unstuck, and if you're his house guest, you're going to curse your luck. But would Kant really follow his self-imposed law, totally regardless of the blood on his floor? Kant's murderer still appears when philosophers try to decide whether principles or consequences ought to be our guide. Tick-tock. The Königsberg Clock, 80 years on, finally stopped. Back then, 80 was quite an age for people to meet their ends, so breathing through his nose while walking may have paid dividends. Through his 60s and his 70s, he'd still questioned everything, his musings on religion reprimanded by his king, while his treatise on perpetual peace to bring an end to war through an international global pact is sadly still ignored. As Königsberg in World War II so violently found, bombs raining from the skies down on Kant's old stamping ground, and the region that he'd known as part of German-speaking Prussia now goes by the name of Kaliningrad, the property of Russia. Yet somehow through the air raids, Kant's tomb survived it all, so his words can still be Instagrammed from the plaque upon the wall. Two things forever fill my mind with wonder and with awe. Above me, the starry heavens. Within me, moral law.